Good evening to everyone in my timeline. My name is Omotola Ajayi, and I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm also the co-founder of Minds and Beyond. We are organizing this program today. It's been long awaited. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in on time and for registering and also for publicizing the program. We've got just an hour today, so we're going to dive in right away. And I've got my co-host here. Her name is Adebusola Adebola. She will do a short introduction and we'll go straight ahead.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Minds and Beyond monthly webinar, where we destigmatize mental health conditions, provide knowledge, transform care, pathway to care, and provide support when appropriate. Today, we are going to be having another amazing time. I'm Dr. Adebusola Adebola. I'm a psychiatrist, currently working as a senior clinical fellow with the NHS. And we have our guest, who is Dr. Tiwatayo Olashibikon. He's a consultant psychiatrist and healthcare management executive. He grew up in Ibadan and studied medicine and surgery at the University of Ibadan. After graduating, he became a consultant psychiatrist following residency in Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Yaba. While in residency, he pursued an online master degree, earning an MSc in business psychology from the University of South Wales. And later on in his training, he served as the pioneer public relations officer of the Association of Psychiatrists in Nigeria. After completing his residency, he moved to Barcelona, Spain to pursue an MBA at YESE Business School, ranked third in the world in 2025. He has also received training from many prestigious institutions, including Johns Hopkins and London Business School. He's currently worked with YESE Business School, and he has worked with many investment teams. So he's an expert when we talk about, recognizing emotion, people management, expressing emotion, and everything under the umbrella of emotional intelligence. Today's discussion really is all about our emotions and the emotions of others, when to identify emotions and when to regulate emotions. But society tells us a lot of things about emotions. For example, they tell us to pay attention to our emotions. Sometimes they say we shouldn't take our emotions too seriously. Why are we taking so many things personal? Sometimes they say we shouldn't react to emotions with behaviors. And there are so many things about emotions. So why are you being overly emotional? And for some people, they say, why are you being so passionate? Or why are you being stoic? Emotions differs with males and females, how we express emotions, and so many things that are going on when it comes to emotional intelligence. So we want to start by asking you, what do you think emotional intelligence is? We can write that in the chat and we'll read the first few ones that we get. What do we think emotional intelligence is? How would you define emotional intelligence?
So I'll be in the chat box waiting. Just a very short definition, nothing professorial, just something short. We can't wait to hear from you. And when Busola read out the bio, I just kept smiling because I don't think there's any other person, at least in our circle, that would do justice to this. I'm going to give a very short, unsolicited story about how I met the guest speaker. So I was working as a subordinate under him in Nigeria, and that was one of the things that stood him out. Yes, he was intelligent. He had the IQ, top flyer, and all that, but he was able to identify emotions. If there was any change in the emotions on my face, he would quickly say, "What's going on? Is there any way I can help?" And he knew when to keep quiet and when to speak. So those are some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And I can't even wait because I know that we're all going to learn lots of things. Yes, I can see the chat box is popping. I love this. I'm just going to go into the chat box right now. First of all, Omolola Kwesho says, emotional intelligence is the ability to manage one's emotions and understand the emotions of others and manage it as well. Wow, we've got such intelligent humans here. Thank you. Aziz says, the ability to understand and manage your own emotions, as well as recognize and respond to the emotions of others. Thank you. That's still in line with what Omolola said. And Hannah has said, emotional intelligence is the ability to manage your emotions and understand others around you. Brilliant. I can see we're all ready for tonight's webinar. And I can say that these definitions are on point. Thank you all for participating. And I believe that we are going to learn a lot tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing definition about emotional intelligence. And we do come across all of these emotional intelligence definitions, but the real question is, what does this mean in the practical sense, in our day-to-day life? What does this mean? Even though we all know this definition, do we know the roadmap that we need to be able to apply this in a structured way in our lives so that we can live a fulfilled, impactful, and a healthier life? Dr. Tiwatayo Olashibiko, what is emotional intelligence?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you, Busola. Thank you, Tola, for inviting me, and everyone for joining. You know, when you were reading what everyone was saying, I mean, I was quite happy and also nervous because people in the chat box seem to be very knowledgeable about emotional intelligence, which is good. I think that we do not necessarily suffer from a lack of knowledge. Many of us, I think what happens is not trying to practicalize, what we know. So, like everyone has said, what's emotional intelligence? Basically, emotional intelligence is about two things: yourself. So I call it, intrapersonal, like Mutala said earlier, and then interpersonal, right? So managing your own emotions and also the emotions of others. For us, for your own emotions, for you to manage something, you have to first of all be aware, right? So the first thing is recognizing your emotions, right? So recognition of your own emotions, the triggers, the patterns, both at an instance and also longitudinally, right? Then secondly, being able to then, regulate these emotions. Some people would say that before you regulate, you should be able to label the emotions. Yes, I agree with that. Maybe 95%. But sometimes even when you don't know the name of the emotion, right? You should be able to say, okay, this, I'm not feeling happy. This is not sadness. Not sure what it is, but it is not sadness, it's not happiness. That is some form of labeling, right? It's some form of recognizing. And then after, we said recognizing that self-awareness, labeling plus or minus, then regulating it, right? You want to manage your emotions so that your emotions do not control you. It's good to have emotions, but the emotions shouldn't control you. And it's not every time negative emotions are bad. We'll come to that later. The next, on the last part, at least, under the interpersonal EI or EQ, whichever one you prefer, is about then using your emotions to motivate you, right? To drive you, to regulate you. So simply say self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation. On the interpersonal side, which is equally as important, talks about empathy, right? Understanding and sensing the emotions of others. And this is not being interpreting what is not there, right? But sometimes it's just okay for someone that for instance, to understand that this person, that there's an emotional change. This is not how this person normally is, and even for someone that you don't know, right? You can just sense that there may be something wrong. Do not be, but you do not have to be 100% sure. But even just sensing that there may be something wrong is enough, emotional intelligence. And then using that particular, will I say, perception now, that sensing, understanding, that empathy to relate with the other. That's the last point there. Talking about using that to communicate, to influence, to build relationships, to resolve conflicts. Therefore, I would say, like everyone has said, emotional intelligence really is about understanding your own emotions, working with your emotions, as well as understanding other people's emotions and working with that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lash. That was a professorial view. So you took the definitions in the chat box and you widened them into intrapersonal and interpersonal. Now, we've spoken about how that the intrapersonal helps us to recognize emotions and also regulate our own emotions, right? And you said that the interpersonal is how that we are able to, without understanding, recognize the emotions of other people and help them with those emotions. Now, for a lot of people here, we're wondering, okay, this sounds like something that I possibly do, but when was the first time, Dr. Lash, that you realized the importance of emotional intelligence?
I mean, there's one story that always jumps out whenever someone asks me a question like this or a related question. I was, I think, 18 years old in 200 level
Okay.
on campus studying medicine. And in my campus fellowship, I was made the director of a unit. In fact, when they made the announcement, I thought I was the assistant director because the person who were called together was my senior in secondary school. She was the deputy head girl. So I just assumed that she was the leader of the unit. I think it was the first meeting we had that they clarified that no, that I was not supposed to head this unit. This unit had this person I described. This unit had people in final year medical school. They had someone who was around 30 at the same time. You know, and so I knew that I would have to direct the unit, not with authority and stamp, but with influence. I knew that I would have to, you know, manage the unit, not because I'm just, I mean, if I was the eldest person, maybe it's easier to use authority, you know, and that was the first time I realized. I didn't know then that it was emotional intelligence, but I just thought it was wisdom, right? And I had to use a lot of wisdom to deal with these people, you know, the younger people, and then the obviously older people. And it was a good thing. I think that was definitely the first time I used emotional intelligence that I remember.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was wondering if you can give us a little bit of some of the skills that you were able to use in that situation, maybe on a day basis.
All right. So let me give you an example. I mean, this particular story, I will say, so I got there and my assistant, I used to call her my director. That's what I used to call her. So, oh, my director, how are you? How are you doing today? You know, and you're having conversations. You are the one making the decision, but you are making it look like you're making it together. Right? And I mean, there's a skill to it. So, my director, what are you thinking? I was thinking that we should have a vigil in this month. You know how it's going to help us to concentrate. It's going to help us to, you know, do this and that. I mean, what do you think? Right? And then she says, oh, good idea, you know. So you are making the person feel important because indeed she's important, right? But, you know, you are carrying her along and, you know, she doesn't see this as, a, you know, it's very easy for her to see it as you lording over her or lording it over her. And she's like, I remember this guy from secondary school, right? So that's why it's important for us to use emotional intelligence, honestly. And I remember not just her, because she was an excellent person, but even other people in the unit. I picked up the phone and called the guy who was in final year medical school. And I said, oh, how are you doing? I don't know if you heard about it, but you know, we did the handover a few days ago. You know, I just wanted to come see you, visit you, greet you, you know, not not loading it. I particularly was able to use this skill later in my residency, where I mean, I finished school quite early. I think I was youngest in my class in medical school, and I was the assistant class rep. You know, I was a senator, 3-time senator on campus, one of the elections I campaigned for, and I was the youngest guy in my class, right? And I think it was also because of the emotional intelligence. You know, you go meet people and make them, you know, you're not going to gaslight, you're not going to, you know, like, but you make them feel worthy, right? And that helps. So I had people who were maybe 5, 7, 8 years younger than me, and were registrars while I was an SR. And if you know medical school very well, I mean medicine very well, very hierarchical, you see a lot of people then use that hierarchy to belittle someone who, you know, is older than you, you know, and that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense, you know. But emotional intelligence is to recognize that the possibility that this person may feel somehow, right? And so you actually, before they even feel it, right, you give them the respect, you know. To be honest, many of those guys reciprocate it, you know. So that I think, I don't know if I've answered your question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you've answered the question. You've really given us some skills that was helpful in terms of interpersonal. But because I also sometimes see that when we talk about emotional intelligence, we tend to lean more towards, you know, recognizing the emotions of others and, you know, understanding the emotion of others. But I truly believe, and it's a controversial opinion, that if you don't recognize your own emotions, you cannot truly recognize and understand other people's emotions. You may try, but it's going to be very challenging. So how do you manage your own emotions?
Good question.
Good. I mean, I can answer that. I can answer that. But you know, before I answer that, you said something, and I just think you know, what you said is very accurate. You know, even though science now lets us know that the part of the brain that is responsible for your own, recognizing your own emotion is a different part of the brain that is responsible for understanding the emotions of others. You know, and so you know, it can never be complete without having the two, you know, and there will always be a lacuna, you know. But now we know that indeed different parts of the brain control it. So if you're lacking in one, you know, you can start to practice the other, you know, and but it definitely can never be complete without a synergy between the two. And so to answer my own, how do I recognize my emotions, or how have I used emotional intelligence personally in my own? The first thing is I always tell myself that I'm not perfect. I think that the cognition that most of us have is that we are great human beings, you know, and that's good, right? You should feel that about you should feel good about yourself. But I always recognize the fact that I'm not perfect. And so and that I have bias, you know. And so I think that allows me to quickly recognize when I'm failing at something, you know, and then I can make amends. You know, what I hate the most is having a blind spot about myself. So I feel like, oh, I'm the best employee in this place. Meanwhile, my bosses, my colleagues feel the opposite way. I mean, that would be very terrible, right? So I deliberately, and I'm not talking about imposter syndrome now. I'm not talking about, you know, not being good at your job. No, I'm talking about recognizing the fact that you may be wrong. You know, recognizing the fact that you're on earth, so you are susceptible to different emotions. You know, and so sometimes I'm not too happy, you know, and I then do what I do an inquiry. Okay, what is wrong exactly? Why are you feeling the way you feel? Let's think about it. What is going on? What has happened? You know, so I do an inquiry for myself, you know, and it helps me, you know. So I begin to recognize. Sometimes I'm not sure what exactly is going on, you know, but I know there's something wrong, right? And then it leads me to the next stage, which is be able to regulate. So sometimes I can tell my wife that, she says, I mean, of course, my wife has known me for maybe 17 years or so. And so I say, what's wrong? Is something wrong? And I say, actually, I think so. I'm not even sure myself what is wrong. You know? And so move to the regulation part. So the regulation part for me is where I try to control my emotions rather than my emotions control me. I'll give this as the last example before you go on. I just came back from Nigeria. I went to Nigeria for work with two of my colleagues, one German, one French. And the French lady was saying that, and I had to drive them around most of the time in Lagos. And the first lady said, when we got back today, she was talking to some of our other colleagues. So what amazed me about Tiwatayo was that, by the way, she doesn't call me Tiwatayo like that. She calls me Tiwatayo with a French accent. In any case,
Hello.
you say Tiwatayo, So what amazes me about, is that traffic in Lagos was crazy. People were driving anyhow, and it was not upset at all. I was like, oh, okay. The when you become self-conscious, self-aware, oh, okay. Hope I actually did not really mess up. And that's, and for me, that was another stamp of, that I try not to allow my emotions control me. I was not always like this, especially that part. And, it took a lot of work, but definitely it starts with recognizing your emotion.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that very practical example of evading road rage in Lagos. For people that are not familiar with Lagos, all I can say is you need a trip there to understand what really happens. So well done for doing that. And I feel like you've shared a lot of important things. One of the most important things that you shared was that you mentioned that you were one of the youngest people in your class. Yes,
no, the exact youngest, because I was assistant class rep. I had the ages of everyone, so I knew that I was the exact youngest.
Right. So you were privy to that information. So you're the youngest person in your class, yet you held lots of leadership positions. And what I understand about being a senator is that you had to be elected by your constituency members. It wasn't something that nobody wanted to do, and then you just found yourself in that position. So it meant that you were doing some things, obviously a lot of things right. Now, there are lots of myths about emotional intelligence. I believe that some people, and I'm sure even I myself, will hold some of those myths. So I'm just going to be trying to engage the audience now. And the first thing is that my first question to everyone, just put in the chat box, is a very short question. Which is more important, emotional intelligence or intellectual intelligence when it comes to your work? So in your workplace, in your career, which is more important, emotional intelligence or intellectual quotient, your IQ? So I'm waiting in the chat box as usual to read the answers and the responses. Let's see. Come on, don't disappoint me, my able audience. Let's see. Anyone, any takers? Or if you don't think anyone is more important, you can put equal to there as well. No takers. Okay, Desire says EQ. Tolulope Olawale says emotional intelligence. Right. I believe they are both equal. That's Bukola Kintunde. Thank you. Happiness Onukalu says they are equal. I like that answer. Very simple, and it passes a message. Joseph Emmanuel says, I think both are equally important. Omolola Kwesho, both. So we have a divided opinion. Some people think that both are important. Some other people think that emotional intelligence is more important when it comes to a workplace. I would say something and then hand it over to Dr. Tiwatayo. So according to the person who found out more about emotional intelligence, his name is Daniel Goleman. What he says is that for us to be in a particular career or profession, we all have around the same IQ. You might have that one-off person that has a higher IQ, but all of us are on the same IQ level most times. But what distinguishes us most times is emotional intelligence. Now, this is my take. And remember that I said we might have different opinions. So, Dr. Lash, you are the emotions expert, at least for tonight. What's your take on that when it comes to workplace?
Yes, 100% both are important. In fact, I dare say both are equally important. Typically, IQ opens the door, right? And EQ is more likely to keep the door open. And so, for instance, if you didn't do well in the interview, right? If your CV is not great, maybe you won't get the job, right? And there's some particular tasks, especially behind the scenes tasks that definitely need a lot of IQ. So you are a coder, you're a data analyst, You know, you probably don't even see the you don't talk to customers, right? You are you are a physicist, and you are the one that is really behind the um what's the word now, semiconductors that we
Right.
use for AI. I'm telling you, if your EQ is 0, you still keep that job, right? Because the whole world needs semiconductors for, you know, so there are definitely some specialized jobs like that, you know, where you have 0.001% of people with such skills, and they get that job because of their IQ. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the truth. Now you also have very, very, very few jobs that what you really need is EQ, maybe not IQ. You know, and so you have jobs like some I have to be very careful right here, but a lot of jobs that require interpersonal relationship, you know, and so you are a salesperson, right? And someone gives you what to sell, and you just go and you sell it. What you really need there is a lot of EQ, right? And not as much IQ as that, right? I'm just saying that to say that some jobs that are very specific and will require. However, majority of jobs will require both of them, you know, in very most of them in very equal amounts, right? So IQ opens the door for you, but to get promoted, to be able to relate with your peers, your subordinates, your superiors, you know, then you will need a lot of EQ, and that's it.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing justice to that. And that's a very balanced view. So I love the quote, IQ gets you the job. That's IQ can secure the bag, but EQ will keep the bag. So yes, I love that. I don't know if any other person felt that way. Thank you so much for enlightening us.
Yeah.
So over to Busola for the
Yeah, I think that was a very, very balanced perspective because the world has really moved away from, you showing EQ to everybody. We are moving towards reasonable adjustment to people with low EQ now when they have that IQ. Neurodevelopmental needs, so many things. We're beginning to move away from that theory. So now we are making provision for a lot of people. So both are equally important. And one of the myths that a lot of people have is that EQ, you're born with EQ. EQ can be learned. And we used to believe that, you can improve your IQ, but you cannot necessarily improve your EQ. But we know that we can improve both if we're really intentional about it, if we can use both together. So no matter how you're feeling or no matter where you are, just know that this is possible. Nobody is born to be, a natural leader. It's not just for some people. It may be easier for some people, but it doesn't mean that, other people cannot have these skills. And that's why we are here today. You've talked about, how you were able to use emotional intelligence to lead in different circumstances, different situations. You've talked to us about some of the strategies that you've used, but I want us to start coning down to, some key things that occur in our day-to-day lives and day-to-day practice, because we know that emotional intelligence is not limited to work. It's something that we need to apply in every aspect of our life. Marriage, parenting, friendships, every aspect of our life, we do really need to have emotional intelligence. And I was wondering, one core thing that, we have polar opposites, giving feedback, whether at work, whether in personal relationships, whether in marriage, whether as a parent. We sometimes struggle when we don't have enough skills. So sometimes we don't know how to give feedback. Sometimes we give feedback in a poor way. How can we strike a balance?
Okay, so this your question is specifically about giving feedback now, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. 100%. Many times, we run away from giving feedbacks, or we give it very harshly. Now, this is what EQ is, right? EQ is knowing that you should give feedback, knowing that the person may not, knowing the different ways the person may react to this feedback, right? And therefore, you should plan your feedback before you give it.
Mm.
And so for me, and I want to use residency as an example, so you are a senior resident, you have a junior resident who is not the best recipient, for instance, of feedback, right?
Mm.
Number one thing is that what is your relationship with that resident? On you are doing 3 months posting together, right? Have you engaged this resident favorably, before? Have you asked, oh, how are you doing? How's your family? Have you tried to build a good relationship with this resident?
Mm.
Typically, when you give feedback from a position of, when you give even constructive feedback, what some people may think is, harsh or negative, but you're coming from a position where you have shown respect before, is more likely to be received.
Absolutely.
Right? It's more likely to be received. And that's what I do. And so I can tell my residents and say, Dr. Let me use Charles as an example now. I say, Dr. Charles, how are you? Your presentation today. In fact, my residents know that I'm very sarcastic. So I have to relax. Some residents know that I'm very sarcastic. So I say, Dr. Charles, your presentation today was quite detailed. In fact, you spent, I'm sure you must have spent 5 days preparing for it. Now the resident knows what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't detailed. I said, Chief, what's going on? Why did you? I said, can't you see that you mentioned, and I start mentioning, and then we start laughing and start joking about it. And I said, okay, so now are you going to do another presentation now, with this? And the person then goes and prepares for it. I'm not afraid of giving feedback, especially because I know that I have deposited enough goodwill, so even if I give feedback, it's more likely to be received. And this is a general rule. There will always be exceptions. There will always be people who do not want to receive feedback, and even when you try your best, but definitely for me, I tell my mentees, who many of them are now senior residents, I say, you can't just, your voice can be heard only when someone has done wrong. Your voice can be heard, when the person does well.
Yes.
The person is presenting at the journal club, for instance, and you're there to support, this person. He didn't ask for it, she didn't ask for it, but you're there to give support. And the person recognizes that Chief is only here because of me. Chief is here to defend me. So the day when you give feedback, the person knows that definitely it's coming from, not a place of, just being difficult.
Wow. Thank you so much. That is very practical. And that's something about feedback. Many times we clamor for feedback, or we want to get feedback, or we want to give feedback, but it has to be balanced. It has to be both the positives, and even when we even say the not so good, it has to be well cushioned. Some people might call it being patronizing or being non-confrontational, but if we were to employ one of the skills of emotional intelligence, which is empathy, then we're able to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. How would I feel if I were to be given this feedback? What would happen if someone said this to me in a particular way? So thank you for sharing. And that also brings me to
sorry for interrupting you. You know what? I just remembered something about the issue of not being confrontational. I think we believe that you have to be confrontational to get results. Right? And so I will give an example from way back and quickly from closer. When I said I was a leader in fellowship, very young guy and all that, by the time we finished 1 year, right, the membership of my unit had grown by over 600%.
Amazing.
We were doing great productions, we were doing great work, and I wasn't the difficult guy. There were other units that were known to have very stern, leaders, right? Because things have to be done this particular way. I'm not going to think, and for me, yeah, things must be done right also. But I think that using emotional intelligence to lead, makes you get better results, than believing that you need to be confrontational to get people to work.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a gem right there. And what you said about your team growing by 600% is definitely an impressive feat. So well done with that. Now, so to my next question is, when you're in a team, you don't even have to be a leader. You could just be a member of the team. How do you navigate things like conflict resolution? Because whether we like it or not, we are all human beings with an array of emotions, and at some point we would step on each other's toes.
Yep.
So how can you as an individual, a member of the team, help in resolving conflict in the team? That's one. I have 1A and 1B. Then 1B is as a leader, because remember one of the things you said was that you recognize that for yourself, you have your own biases. So you might like some members of the team more than others. If they're involved in conflict, how are you able to help them resolve it in a fair and a free way? So A is as a team member, B is as a leader. How do you go about conflict resolution? Thank you.
Okay. I know that's the question you asked, but I'll try to modify it just a bit. I'm sorry, because I had a very good story that I think would be helpful. I was in an NYSC camp. You get there, nobody knows you from anywhere typically. And then I was made the CMD of the clinic. We had about 17 doctors, lab scientists, 33 professionals in all, right? And then on the second day or the third day of camp, some of us who are not Nigerians, let me describe this quickly. So typically, camp is NYSC camp is a 1 year almost paramilitary training program that you have to do as a compulsory service for Nigeria or to Nigeria, and then you are posted to places typically very far from your house. And so the first 2 days, as I already created this environment where people knew that they could speak with me. I mean, after all, being CMD is just first among equals. You guys are definitely equals. Nothing, And so it was a cool relationship. Then a lady entered the third day. She is an optometrist. Before then, I had never heard the word optometrist, and I did not know that in Nigeria you could actually study DO, that is Doctor of Optometry. So she came in and she insisted that her name is Dr. Mary. I'm using Mary just for today as a name, Dr. Mary. And the doctors came to me and said, one lady came earlier today. She wrote her name among the list of doctors, and she's not a medical doctor. So we struck, and I should strike her name out of the list of doctors. And I wondered, okay, you guys, just hold on. Okay, just give me the list, and then I try to get to it. Okay, I'll look into it. At that point, I could sense that they were upset. I could sense that they felt, why is this person claiming to be what she's not? But I was sincere with myself.
You've been muted accidentally, Dr. Lash.
Okay, thank you. My co-host here has, taking over.
Okay.
If you could give me a minute, I think our mom is finally here, so I can, hand over.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. And I just wanted to quickly highlight how Dr. Lash is gracefully multitasking. He's dishing out emotional intelligence stuff, and he's also handling his baby there. That's so wonderful. Yes. You know how that most times when you're watching a Zoom meeting and a child interrupts the solar, how that maybe the father is saying, go, move back. But he's doing that so gracefully. That's lovely.
Okay.
Yes. Welcome back. We just finished gossiping about you.
Oh, okay. Well, even if I believe that the other people on the call who will support me, even if you and Busola, are gossiping about me. So as I was saying, and then she said, and so first thing I did was I went to read up about this, right? And I realized, actually, there are about 2 or 3 universities in Nigeria who are accredited to give Doctor of Optometry degree. That's number 1. Number 2, they do 6 years, they do 1 year internship, and then they come to serve. Immediately, I recognized that this lady must have had confrontations with medical doctors in the past, where doctors try to belittle her. and she already came in with a defense, you know. And so I said, okay, no problem. I said, we are going to do a new list. All doctors will be on the same list. And then you write what type of doctor you are in. We have to create a column. So medical doctor, when it's her turn, she writes doctor of optometry, you know, and that's what we did. Every other doctor, I was calling them by first name, you know, we're friends, you know. But because she insisted on being called Dr. Mary, I was calling her Dr. Mary, you know, and everything was, you know, it was okay. About a week later, I called her, Dr. Mary, good morning, how are you doing? She said, no, now call me Mary. Mary is fine. You know, and we just, I mean, that's how we were able to settle the whole thing, you know. And so my point is that this for me was an example of conflict resolution using emotional intelligence, right? I recognize my deficit of knowledge. I recognize that the doctors wanted me to support them against, because I'm their colleague, against someone who's not a medical doctor. I recognize that, then I recognize that this lady, you know, would have in the past been subjected to ridicule in quotes, and therefore had already maintained this high level of, you know, antibodies, and was prepared, you know, to fight. And that's how I was able to resolve that conflict. I don't know if that answers the question about how, you know, emotional intelligence can be used to solve conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It did. We had some audience question, and we're going to start, you know, asking you those questions.
Okay.
The first one was, you know, how can you apply emotional intelligence in relationship? And you've talked a lot about professional relationships, and maybe we can talk a little bit about personal relationships. I have one funny story I love to share about self-awareness and learning to label my own emotions. I remember when I started my relationship with my husband, and you know, as females, when something is wrong with you, it's clear to everybody, to the whole world, that there's something wrong with you. And then nothing, I'm okay, I'm fine. And then, you know, it keeps asking over and over and over again. And then one day you said, the next time I see that you're not okay and you say you're okay, I'm going to believe you. This is exhausting. So next time I just say what is happening. Oh, so and so happened. And I began to, you know, recognize my own emotions and label my emotions. So how can we apply emotional intelligence in relationships?
Okay. All right. So I think the first thing I would say is that when someone has high EQ, right, that's high emotional intelligence.
Yes.
They use it in every facet of their life. You know, they use it in facets of their lives. And having a good IQ would make you a better wife, make you a better husband, make you a better boss, a better subordinate, you know, a better student, right? And there are studies to this, especially in the area of being a better leader, being a better student, right? That there are already studies to that. But I can tell you that in marriage also, in relationships, right? Many relationships go through tough times, not because the partners are bad people, the leaders are bad people, no, but because they lack the ability to recognize the emotions of their partners, right? And to modulate themselves, you know, based on the emotions of their partner. People say things like, I'm a Christian, and the scripture that says, love your neighbor as yourself. You know, I'm sure many people in other religions also, you know, say similar things. And sometimes we love our partners, you know, the way we love ourselves. What really we need is to love our partners the way they want to be loved.
Yeah.
And that is emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is knowing that when I'm upset, I don't want anybody to speak to me. But when my partner is upset, she wants me to speak to her. You know? And so that's emotional intelligence. And I'll give a quick story. Recently, my wife, my wife, just keep my mind up. I'm coming, just a second. I remember. Yes, something happened, and she, I was already going. I think it had to do with she applied for a job, right? And she got a negative response. And the last time I applied for a job and I got a negative response, what did I do? I looked at the email, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to be sad for the next 1 hour, and immediately after the 1 hour, I'm going to sleep and wake up. When I wake up, I'm going to dance, and dance, right? And then I'm sure it will be over. And that's actually why I did. That's what I did. And so when my wife told me that, oh, she didn't get called for the interview, so I said, okay, you know what you should do? You should, you'll probably be sad for a while, it's okay, but just go and sleep, and when you wake up, you play music. But immediately I started saying this, I caught myself that, you're not being emotionally intelligent here, right? You think you are being kind, right? But it's sometimes we are honestly wrong, and that was here now. With all honesty and with all love in my heart, I wanted to tell her what worked for me, right? But emotional intelligence is recognizing her own thought pattern and how she wants to be catered to at that point, right? And then catering to her needs based on that. And so this is to say that emotional intelligence definitely helps in relationship, in marriage, and we need to be more cognizant, of this in our daily lives.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Dr. Lash. I'm about to be tested on my emotional intelligence as my son has walked into my space, but I'm going to lead the example, just like we said. Yes, I'm coming, my darling. Busola, please, can you take over?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I actually wanted to ask a follow-up to that, because one of the audience questions that we got also was, and because we take this question seriously, was, how can I regulate my emotions, especially as a parent? How do I apply emotional intelligence for kids?
Yeah. Okay. Ooh, good question. So this something happened to me today, right? Just today. I was in a session with my daughter in public. We went for what I would call like a medical visit. Yeah. And then in the doctor's room, she picked up something and threw it on the floor. And I said to Ayato, pick it up. And she goes, and then she knew I was scolding her. And what she does typically when you're scolding her is that she looks static, almost like someone having an absence seizure. Just look like this. When I can hear you, but I'm hearing you, like, no, you're not talking to me. And she just goes like this. I said, Tiwayato, and she was looking like this. And I said, if you don't pick it up, I'm going to leave you here. And then the doctor said, no, don't talk to her that way, And in my mind, I was thinking, people don't know it. You think it's your culture. In my own culture, we discipline our children very sternly, but I was saying that in my own mind.
Yes.
But I knew that I definitely could not voice that out, right? And I was a bit upset that she was trying to tell me how to train my child, right? But once again, I didn't show that. I was just thinking where she probably was doing typically what as I've read a lot about child psychology and all that. So I allowed it to go. But I was processing I'm going to have a final say in this room. So I thought I was going to pick that thing. So I was just processing how I was going to make sure she does that. So at the end of the day, the doctor picked it up herself. But when we were about to leave the office, I picked that thing, right? And I gave to Ayato. I said, now to Ayato, drop it on the table.
Okay.
And then she took it and then she dropped it. I said, we can go. Now, so I'm also saying that to say this, that EQ is not an abstract concept, right? It's something that when we develop, we will have different opportunities that will test it, right? And you'll be able to practice and practice, and keep getting better at it.
Yeah.
And so even with children, with training children, when to be very to be stern, when to show 100% love, of course, which is all the time. Even when you're stern, you're stern in love.
Yes.
When to show, when to cuddle a child, all that, adds a lot of emotional intelligence to it. And so even if you allow your child to do whatever they like, however they like, because you're trying to pamper them, that's not emotional intelligence. That's not emotional intelligence, because with emotional intelligence, you are trying to understand their emotions, right? And prepare them for the best outcome possible. And so if you do anyhow, allow them to do anyhow, you're not preparing them for the best outcome possible.
Thank you for sharing that very practical example. And I believe that it does answer one of the questions that we have in the chat box that says that many thanks, Dr. Lash. Are there cultural differences in how emotional intelligence is expressed or valued? Now, I also wanted to mention that you said something very important when you were talking about what played out with Tiwayato at the doctor's place. So even though at that moment you could easily flare up and say, this is how I would train my child, but you were able to immediately recognize your own emotions, the emotions of the child psychologist, and even your daughter's emotions. And it was that patience that helped you to just, come out and do the right thing, and everybody was fine. So that's one thing. Another thing that you mentioned that was very crucial, and I thought that at that point the audience really engaged, was that you said that emotional intelligence is not abstract. It's something that we would apply in every facet of our lives. And it made me remember something that happened recently. So I like to think that I'm all up for personal development. I'm growing. And something happened to me recently. In fact, a few days back, something happened. And the way I reacted to that situation, I was like, okay, you're not yet there. And that's why we've organized this program. At that point, I flared up. And a few moments later, I was like, oh, Omotola, I could have handled this in a better way, could have been more mature about this. And that's it. Emotional intelligence requires intentionality. It requires continuous education. So what we knew 100 years back, things are evolving thanks to technology, thanks to the wealth of knowledge that we've got. I'll be asking you one more question from the chat box. It's from a professor, one of the professors that have come onto this webinar. He was at the previous webinar. If anyone recognizes him, just put a thumbs up from the addiction webinar. He says, metacognition and EI, what's your view?
Okay.
Professor.
All right. I know the two people who have come on this call before. So which of them?
It's Dr. Alfred.
Well, actually, any one of them you even mentioned, if anyone you mentioned, they were both my teachers during residency. So, Dr. Alfred, good evening. I respect you so much. So the question about metacognition and AI. Okay. Let me just quickly mention what metacognition is. For people that don't metacognition is, in very simple terms, you can define it as thinking about thinking. Thinking about your own thoughts, and it's very, very incorporated in emotional intelligence. So the fact that you recognize and you are aware of your thoughts, or of your feelings, of your emotions, is already part of emotional intelligence. And it's almost like looking at yourself like this, right? Okay, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? I'm feeling this emotion. What is the emotions? What is the thought process behind me feeling this way? And if you don't recognize your emotions, right, then it's difficult to then say you want to regulate it. Yes, you do understand my point. And so that is the concept of the metacognitive part of it, right? Is thinking about your thought process, and how your feelings, your actions, depend on what you are thinking.
Thank you. So in essence, metacognition is part of emotional intelligence. I have someone has raised their hand. Thank you, Chidima. You can have 15 seconds to ask your question because we're about to wrap up, but I really want to hear from the audience. So I appreciate you raising your hand. So yes, over to you, Chidima.
Thank you very much. So straight to the point, I want to ask, is it possible that emotional intelligence also means that sometimes one may need to flare up? Now, I'm asking because of this. This background knowledge is this. There's this organization that I started doing work for. In 6 months, I brought in incredible results for them. And they ought to pay me in terms of commission, but they held back from doing that. Now, moving forward too, because of my 6 months impressive results, I was given a promotion to become a manager, which would make me the youngest manager. Now, some persons were one way or the other holding it back from being possible. The official letter I got wasn't stating the goal. They were even not ready to increase the salary. So I started even in 3 months, but then they had not improved the salary. Now, but for those two cases, the only thing that resolved it was that I flared up, and if I would put it as chaos, and that was what made it to happen. Because if I had been calm about it, they probably would not have done anything. So does emotional intelligence also mean that sometimes it doesn't mean you always need to, because all the conversations we'll be having has been, oh, you try to resolve things calmly. So does it really require that sometimes you may just need to go out?
100%. 100%. See, emotional intelligence is not about being a pushover. No. Right? It is even deliberately doing what you are doing. You know, and I have a quick example. This is not the best example to give as a good child of God and a Christian, but let me just give it. Once it was in university. There was this guy who was, violent, I don't know, he just didn't like me for whatever reason. You know, and one particular day, he, I don't know why he started a fight, right? Now I know I can't fight. I know that I don't know how to fight. I don't, he probably will beat me. And I wasn't even, and so what did, okay, anyway, I wasn't, will I say, uncontrollably angry. What I did was that I wanted him to know that I wasn't a pushover. So what did I do? As I was talking, I was moving to where the crowd was, right? I was moving to where there was a lot of crowd, and I started shouting. I said, come and beat me. No, come here if I don't, and I started making a lot of noise. Of course, I knew that there are people that I will be able to do that will separate us, I said, no, come and beat me, why do you think you can do this? And then I started really making noise, and people were holding him and holding me, In my mind, I knew that if so, I started leaving him little by little. I said, okay, it's time for me to start going also. Because if it's fight, this guy will finish me here, And then I just said, okay. And then when people started leaving, I said, in fact, anyway, it's okay. I forgive you. Just so that next time, and then I left. But I was intentional about that, right? I knew that I can't fight. I don't know how to, you probably even beat me, but I just wanted him to know that, I'm not a pushover and whatever. So I would deliberately do what I did, staged it in a sense, and then worked out. I'm saying that to say that emotional intelligence is not about, no, it's about, okay, these people, what I need to do is to actually scream at them so that they are going to release my money with them, So you actually recognize your emotion, right? You recognize that their own emotions, so maybe they are thieves. Maybe they are actually trying to hide behind, you understand, right? And you are actually doing what you are doing to be able to get a positive outcome out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lash. We have one final question here, and I think it's important for us to address it because it's what a lot of people go through and they struggle with, the right way to approach it without, having difficulty with the relationship ultimately. How do you deal with insubordination in an emotionally intelligent way?
Oh, great question. You need to understand, so for me, I'll give you a direct, direct answer. One, for people who are my subordinates, right? First of all, I try to display leadership, first. And without requesting what's the word to use now? Without requesting perfection from them initially. Right. So I display the leadership, I display the how are you doing, the camaraderie, help them with the work sometimes when they need it, and this goes on for a while. While I'm doing that, right, I'm also laying the basis of how I want this relationship to be, right? Okay, and in a very friendly way. Many people, in my experience, convert, this and convert this. So the respect you show them, they give it to you back. That's my experience. So initially I don't even, especially when you are working when you are doing something that your skill is so it's obvious. So they can see that you are more skilled than them, right? They can see that you are more knowledgeable than them. And therefore, the respect that you are giving them, they know that if it's about deserving it, right, they've not earned the respect. You're only giving them that respect because that's the right thing to do. Many of them are lying. However, I've also encountered one or two persons, who would just not align, and for those people, so you are telling them, okay, I'm going to write a report about you, because we've had this conversation like 3 times, but it seems like you want to do what you really want to do, and you're saying it in a matter of fact, nice way, in fact, and I'm not saying this because I'm on the podcast and I want to say what. No, I mean, I don't know if I have had, the hosts at some point, I work with them, but I'm sure the other people can probably relate to some of these things. I would just tell you as it is. You are supposed to come for a journal club. The past 3 weeks, you've not come at all. What really is going on? And the person tells me, actually, I don't know, something tangible, and I'm, oh wow, sorry about that. Okay, what? How can I help you? Right? But the person is coming and giving me lies or whatever, I said, you know you're lying. You know that I know that you're lying. We both know that, both of us, so next time I'm going to see you because you know that I've caught you that you lied, right? So next time you won't be able to lie, so you have to come, right? And you I mean, just matter of factly, but the person still doesn't, and then you put a report, but nobody would be able to say that Dr. Lash did not try, to lead by example, to lead by respect, to lead, right? You should, all those things should come first. That's my belief. Should come first, right?
Yeah.
Before
Absolutely.
we
There would definitely be that 1% of people in your team or in your life experience that you have. But I've definitely been a very big believer of, to get the best from people, you need to give a little of yourself. Relationship ends not only because of what we couldn't get, but also because of what we couldn't give. So both ways, and you've done a very good job of explaining that.
Thank
So
you.
we are
Sorry, I just want to say one last thing.
Yes, please.
And even when it fails, like you said, that 1%, I just tell myself, Jesus had Judas, right? And Jesus gave a lot, but one person said, is it by force? I'm not going to change. So I mean, sometimes it's not on you, but make sure that you have done your part as a leader, in the first instance.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for telling us that modeling is important, and you haven't just said it, you haven't just talked the talk, you have actually walked the walk, and some of us here are living testaments and testimonies of that. So because we promised to have this session for an hour, we'll be wrapping up now, but we just want to quickly share details of our next webinar. And as I do that, if you enjoyed this session, I want to see thumbs up for Dr. Lash and claps, because he gave of himself, and I know that we have learned 1 or 2 things from this webinar. So the next webinar is going to be on the first Thursday of August, 7th of August. It's at same time, 7 p.m. GMT +1. And guess the topic. We're going to be talking about how to put an end to work burnout, or to burnout in our lives. And I just want us to know that that's going to be an insightful session. The speaker that is coming for that session is the bomb, just like every of our other speakers that we've had. They've been excellent and they've given of themselves and they've prepared so well. I just want to thank everyone for joining, for staying till the end. I want to recognize every single person that is on this call. I want you to know that you are important to us. And this is Minds and Beyond. What we do is we try to destigmatize mental health, and we try to talk about different topics. If there's any topic that you would like us to talk about, you know where to find us. We've got our email. Busola, please help put the email in the chat box. It's mindsandbeyond@gmail.com. If there's any pending issue that you would like us to trash, and if you have more questions for the speaker, I'm sure he's happy to accommodate them. So if you send us an email, he would always revert. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Olash. You don't know how enlightened and how liberated I feel, how much more the audience. Thank you so much, my co-host, Busola. It's been awesome doing this with you. See you again next month, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.